wonder if I should. Okay, we can start. This is Diggs. We're back with another episode of TheoryForge, and we've got Veluux back. We're regrouping with Veluux. You've been gone for a while, so what have you been up to, Veluux? Why haven't we seen you?
I have been just super busy, really, just working two jobs and spending more time with my family over the summer. My other job has been kind of a lot of fun. I've been working out with the local Forest Service, so I've been like running in the woods all day and riding ATVs and dirt bikes and learning the area I just moved into. So it's been a lot of fun. I got to get out in nature and recenter myself, and so it was a good time. I mean, it was a good change of pace from sitting in my office all day for a year, pretty much. So I had some
So
good time.
were you saving animals? Were you firefighting? What were you doing out in the woods?
I was just doing trail maintenance for hiking trails and motorized trails so people can access the national forest. We handled the wilderness trails too, so we were like going out into places where you're not even allowed to take like a chainsaw because it has gasoline in it. So it's pretty crazy. It was pretty fun. Got to see some really remote areas, really beautiful areas too. So
And
love this state.
and you've kind of been keeping up with your blog. Have you been? I've really been following the weekly blog that you do too actively.
Yeah, I was posting a few things here and there on 10 Ton Hammer, but not nearly as much as I'm starting to now again. So I'm going to be hitting my column will be a few times a week again, and then a bunch of news and stuff. So yeah, I've got all that. I have another article I'm going to write later tonight or finish later tonight and post up. But yeah, it's going to be it's getting rolling again. I'm just getting into the swing of being at my desk again and knowing what's going on in the gaming universe and the news that's going on and what everybody's up to. So you guys will notice me active on Twitter a lot more now. So starting to catch back into the swing of things.
And you have a stream going? Did you start a new weekly stream that you were doing for a while with somebody?
Yeah, with 10 Ton Hammer, I started doing 10 Ton Hammer talks with one of the co-staffers there, Jeremy. He kind of covers all the MOBA and esports related news, and we decided we kind of make a good team, so we are tag teaming kind of like the content that 10 Ton covers, and I kind of talk MOBA or MMOs, he talks MOBAs, and we hit different topics, swing back and forth. Next week we actually have like I think we're going to have a really cool guest of some upcoming CCG/RPG game. I'm not sure. It's mostly confirmed. We're going to be seeing a demo of it next Tuesday, and then hopefully have a guest developer on Friday for, I think it's 3 p.m. Eastern is our show before TheoryForge, so you guys can check it out if you want to see that. But
Cool. Well, I wanted to talk about groups. I think I got the idea when we were talking with Renfail a couple of weeks ago from Saga of Lucimia, just because it was interesting the way he was talking about the way he wants groups. Well, he wants the whole game to be group, no solo content at all. And I'm glad to have you on this week, Veluux, because often when we're just even chatting, off camera in Skype, you're complaining about wanting a game that will allow you to group, and there's not something that fits that bill for you. So I'm wondering, just to start, what people are looking for in MMORPGs. Because I don't think of it so much as a grouping experience. I like to socialize, but the social stuff that I do isn't necessarily in a formal group, and I consider a group when you connect with 4 people and you form a party, actually. And often when I'm talking, because I solo a lot, that doesn't mean that I don't socialize. So when I say that I solo in MMORPGs, that means that I'm not in a formal group, but that doesn't mean that I'm not socializing with other people. All kinds of ways to socialize, usually without needing to be in a formal group. Now, what I used to like to do back in vanilla EverQuest, I think we were able to buff people without being in a group, and I loved that, just running around. And I was a druid often, so I would give people Spirit of the Wolf. But I liked just going around and healing people and not having to be locked into a group. but I'm curious to see what types of experiences people are asking for or hoping for um, when they go into an MMORPG, because I want to socialize, but it's not necessarily in a formal group. But I hear, like Veluux, I'll start with you. I hear you often seem to mention that you're looking to be in a group.
Yeah, I think things change as I get older, and I start realizing my schedule doesn't sync up with everybody. I know when I used to play all the time, I would play with my brothers, as I probably said several times on the show, but we're all the same age, and we would group up and do all kinds of stuff together in a formal group. And then, I have a few friends that I would play with too and group up. But I kind of agree with what you were saying at first. Like, to me, I'm more in it for the socialization. Grouping up can be a part of that. It doesn't have to be if there's good socialization in the game. Actually, if the socialization, like the social mechanics of the game, are the way I would want them to be, formal groups wouldn't be what they are now. You wouldn't see them in this type of. They would be a lot looser, just more understood by what you're cooperating. The agenda you're cooperating on together. So it wouldn't be some type of party system, which I get why they do those things to give experience bonuses or other things. But I don't think in a game done differently with improved social dynamics and the way that you interact with the world and change the world, and the way that you end up meeting with other people and performing, taking on quests with them or going into battle with them, can be a lot looser than the way it is. But we just haven't got there quite yet. I'm sure there are some games out there that have experimented with looser group, like less formal group situations, but I haven't played any of them recently. So.
And when you think about that, are you thinking primarily about combat? Is that what your focus would be, or is it just that that's the default because that's the way these games are created,
Yeah,
so
maybe.
that combat
I
is the
think
focus?
like my military background just leads me to the natural thing. A party to me is like a little fire team. You've got a little small group. Everybody has their role in it, and they perform their mission. And so it is really combat oriented. I think in a good game that has a lot of elements other than combat, with trade and crafting, and also diplomacy, which is a big one. I think, and a social game should really implement on a large scale. With that, you wouldn't have like a traditional grouping. Your diplomacy would be probably bigger groups. You'd be involved in guilds and other small cliques maybe within a guild, but you'd never be attached in some type of linked, I don't know, formally linked way that you can see on your screen. A little pop-up window. I'm with, I'm in a group with these people. So, but I don't know. That's just kind of my take on it.
Zog?
Uh, the idea of a group just being the people that you get together to play the mini game within the game with, I think is a bad thing. Like, running an instance is playing a mini game within a game. It is a totally separate experience, and I've been playing the part where I'm supposed to be interacting in the world, but the world's lame. So I'm just going to use this world as a lobby, but hey guys, I need 4 more people so that I can go play the mini game. And if it's not a mini game, and I've said this many times, if it's not a mini game, if it is the game, I think that WoW style dungeon and raid as the whole game is cool. I think it's interesting. I like the idea, but that concept of there's this separate mini game that is more entertaining than the main game, but if I don't have a group of 5 or 20 people, depending on which tier of it, I'm excluded from it. I don't like it. For me, grouping should be meaningful social structures and sometimes involving combat. If there's a challenge, like let's say that the four of us were all members of the same city. If something were happening, if there were an orc invasion, or if there were players from another city attacking us, I would expect that we would get together and we would work together to solve the shared
Responsibility.
or yeah,
we share a drive
yeah.
as our characters, and the contextual nature of the conflict causes us to work as a team. And whether there's a UI structure to facilitate, breaking up into different groups, and just like being on different comm channels or something or not, that's irrelevant to me. It's why people are getting together for a group. If it's just, well, the mini game here is designed so that 5 people do it. That just doesn't feel right to me anymore. I have had a lot of fun doing that.
There's an encounter or a challenge. It doesn't necessarily have to be a conflict, I think. I love the way you described it in the sense of the world just being a lobby, and then we end up in this smaller co-op group. It's actually, we play it like a co-op game from 4 to 25 people, and the rest of the world, we don't really care about that, except to, like a lobby, bring more people into our raid or our group.
Had to grind through that world in order to get to max level to play the mini game that we really wanted to play. That's garbage. That's garbage, is what it is.
I think that having formal social structures are extremely important for any massive multiplayer game, or any multiplayer game really. But having formal small group structures isn't. Like, it really isn't. And unless there's something specific in your game that requires a formal structure, like maybe you do have large scale battle, like what is it, Elder Scrolls Online. There's some other ones, but Camelot Unchained is going to have massive realm versus realm. Now, if you were to group up because you're actually participating in a large scale battle and you're like in military, that would make sense. But just for the pure purposes of having an arbitrary mini game, like Sog said, or having some type of experience bonus, it just feels so artificial of a way to just piece people together, because developers have to do that because they know people don't want to work together in their games because they're so solo friendly now. So I don't know. That's how it looks to me.
I don't know that we need to get to Neuro's rant, but before the rest of us listen to him for 30 minutes, I don't know that it's because games are solo friendly. There needs to be a variety of things that people can do in the world on their own. That being a part of the world should be a character experience of your character and how you are a part of that world. And that should be a focus. So there should be plenty of things that you can accomplish that may not be going and killing a dragon, on your own. But
hopefully
the reason that it's about it, the game is about the character in these games that we're talking about. That it's about that every individual character is being fed the same story about how they're affecting the world that isn't really being affected. So everyone in World of Warcraft, or everyone in Rift, or everyone in Star Wars: The Old Republic they're being the same person in the game. So everyone is the same person. And there may be 6 or 8 different varieties of that person, but it isn't diverse. And because it isn't diverse, and because the paths, and because the roles, and because the experiences aren't different, it doesn't cause people with different views and different goals to come together, and the possibility of goal convergence doesn't exist, where groups naturally form looking for the same thing. That I'm looking for this because that's me, and everybody else thinks that's me too. Even when you get to the raid, you're doing the raid because you are on a quest to kill this thing, and it just so happens that everyone else is on a quest, and the people that are
But
giving the
kind of
quest,
separately. You could be on the same
yeah, it doesn't
quest,
matter
but
who you're with.
separately. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does. And
Yeah. I was
I
going to
think
say that.
that's the issue, that you're taught that the game is about you being the hero of this NPC world.
Yeah, one of the things I was looking forward to with EverQuest Next was the concept of us building kinos. And because we're all trying to work towards this same goal, this shared goal of building kinos, we would collectively be working together in any case. Even if we're kind of doing a solo thing, we're going to come back and share our resources or share our products in order to achieve this massive goal, which is the rallying call. We're all rallying to work together, the whole world, basically, to complete this challenge that's going to last for 3 months. And so hopefully that wouldn't be separating us into these little smaller groups in the smaller mini games. But what was your idea, Neuro? What are you looking for in groups and games?
Well, there's actually quite a lot, and one of the first things is for groups to actually be something a little bit more meaningful. I like the idea that everybody who participates in a particular event, regardless of whether they're in some sort of arbitrary group or party of some sort or not, still gets rewarded for their participation so long as they're all on the same side. And if you're on the opposing side, if you did something to contribute but you still ended up, getting routed and managed to escape, you could still, I could see even that, or even dying in battle, being rewarded in different ways for that. So part of it's really, making sure everybody is rewarded, win or lose, based on your participation, and then any faction or other sort of relationships would kind of naturally be dished out with those sorts of events. Now, on top of that, I think actually having personal relationships with the other characters is something that's really, really meaningful. So whether you're crafting with people a lot, or you're in a party with them, you're harvesting a lot with them, the more you take actions with certain people, even if it's just in proximity, but amplified if you're actually in a group, the more you develop relations towards them. Likewise, if you constantly get ganked or gank this one person, you're going to develop negative relations with that person, and that might potentially have other consequences. You can't engage in contracts with each other. You spot each other from further away, and kind of if there's any targeting priority on the game, it always ends up being on that person who you're the most opposed to, rather than potentially who everyone else is attacking, because you've got this feud already built up. So that's one of the things, and that's not just with grouping, but interaction between players in the world in general, both PvP and PvE. And that's quite a lot. I could definitely go on that subject for a while, but I think I should probably actually talk about crafting a little bit too, because that's another thing that I feel like there's definitely ways where it could seriously be beneficial to make groups a worthwhile part of it. Having a mentoring system where you actually teach the person, you log off at the place where they're going to be doing their crafting, and when they're going to do their crafting, your character, logs on for a moment, walks over, and helps you go through the motions, and they get a little teaching skill, and you get a little bit bonus to your crafting, and it works out for everybody. That sort of stuff. Or I could see definitely some tasks that are best to do, one person, maybe with one person looking over, whittling small idols that are the size of your hand. You don't need a party of 5 people gawking at you while you're trying to whittle one of those, and there's certainly not enough room for 5 sets of hands to work on something like that. Something larger, working on a sword, a lot of people can kind of work on their own segments of it. There's a lot of those shots in various movies, Western and Eastern, where you got a bunch of dudes working on one sword with the tiny little hammers or whatever. So the idea that you would be able to work with people in a group, and the more that you work with them as a group in crafting, the better you get at crafting together. And this could be a lot of things that could seem menial but are actually really important, like you've been hanging doors with this other dude for like, 3 months. When it comes to hanging doors, it's like the king has this contract. I was like, oh hell yeah, we'll fucking nail this. Yeah, I've had some booze tonight. Sorry about that. Did I take the
An
language thing
example
off
of
at some
something
point?
that happened in that I'm back playing IKEA in the
Yeah,
text
you are.
game,
Drink.
and something that happened yesterday in the game was each city needs a variety of commodities. Stone is one of them in order to maintain repairs and keep a city going. And we had one person out scouting areas of the world for areas that were ripe for mining stone. Other people working together, pooling the resources needed to place mines, and other people going in and mining them out. And it was that there wasn't like, look, LFG need to mine stone. It was, everybody naturally ended up in the roles where they accomplished. It was this like organic group thing where it really was 6 or 7 people that were a functional unit working together, but it was only because they had a common goal and they had skill sets that worked collaboratively.
How did
And they
those
just
people
did it.
find each other?
There is a city chat channel.
And so they were in the city, but what happened? So you're in the city, and what was your role? Were you part of that?
I was not actively part of that, but I was
Watching it, or
Yeah.
hearing it.
I could have been, but I already had my own mine, and I didn't have enough space, or I'm not rich enough to have 2 mines running at the same time.
And so, but how did they know that there was a need for this mine to be scouted for? Did somebody scout and come back and report that they had found a place, or
There was one person out scouting, just looking, or prospecting, and checking areas to find.
and so they would come back and report, and then people who could take the next step would just follow through?
Yeah, that, and it's not even for yourself. It's that eventually, in order to maintain the city and in order to improve the city defenses and things like that, to keep us from just getting killed when we want to be safe, the city needs stuff. So we want to make sure that when mining areas are available, that we're taking advantage of it. And nobody thinks, oh, I don't want to do that. That's just boring work. No, it's like people get together and they do it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
and that's... Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is one element that, we really had a lot of us in love with what EverQuest Next was trying to do, because something that facilitates that type of grouping and social structure is that the world can change. Like if your city can be destroyed, if things can change, you have to upkeep it. And it's not something that you need a quest NPC to tell you. You'll see the wear and tear, or everybody will know, and they'll just have this knowledge and work together to cooperate a larger goal, which is, something that EverQuest Next talked about doing with rallying calls, or, having different types of city defense because of the dynamic change. And I think, the reason we don't see it in MMOs really a lot today is because they are very static, and they don't have, if they had more change, opportunities like that for informal grouping and, a larger cause that people can be, compelled to participate in, besides just, I am the Horde, I am the Alliance, and you're my enemy, so that's our common cause to fight each other. Like, there's no substance to it. And
Yeah, I mean, when I used to think about EverQuest Next, again, and especially the concept of us building Kinos together over 3 months, I'm thinking, okay, if I spend 3 months trying to get a city built, I'm going to be making friends with the people who are also there for 3 months getting it built. And once it's built, I'm not going to want it to be destroyed. So even if I'm out somewhere else and I hear that Kinos is under attack, I'm going to come running back to Kinos to make sure that it's not attacked and destroyed because I spent 3 months building it. And hopefully, because we're in that same spot for 3 months, we'll be making connections and relationships with the other people who have been there, helping us build this city for 3 months. And so possibly one of the things that's been happening and why we can't, it's more difficult to maintain these groups or relationships is because when they're not our brothers in the same house, is you could start leveling at different periods. So often the way it would work for me is I might, because I was a localization manager, I might be working on the English game, getting the text out at one point, and then switch over to European time as I'm getting translations. So the time that I was spending playing would be off from the rest of the group. And by the time I've come back, they're off in another spot. And that's a problem of leveling, having levels, being able to out-level an area, and then branching out as you leave that area and never coming back and being in that same spot. So it's very easy to lose these relationships that you built with other players because you might not be coming back to the same place.
But that's why organization should be and grouping should be fluid. And this is what I don't like about the Saga of Lucimia plan, where it's like they expect that you're going to have a group of 10 people that you log on at the same time with and you play with all the time. That no, if grouping is contextual and the people who are available at that time when something is happening get together to work towards a common goal, you get to meet the people and build better personal relationships with the people who play at the same time as you, but your fate doesn't become tied to them. Now the days where you're waiting for your raid time and your main tank just hasn't shown up yet, so you have 19 people waiting around at the entrance to a zone and one guy hasn't shown up, and he shows up 30 minutes late and other people have already left, so everybody wasted their night because the game is set up in a way that I absolutely need that one guy. It's not natural grouping. It's forced, and that's the problem.
It's forced, and go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, tying into the fact, having loose grouping and this flexibility, makes it feel more organic. It makes it feel like, first of all, it makes strangers feel more important in the game because at any point in time they could be an important person to your agenda. So it starts to connect the larger mass of people together, and one thing I like too is player housing, not in any MMO we've really played before, but player housing in any game that's actually allowed players to kind of just put their house anywhere. Like, yeah, there are a lot of downsides to that, and it can make the world look ugly and crappy, but any game that's done that has created and facilitated small group localization, in an informal way. Ultima Online had it. It worked well. Star Wars Galaxies, it worked well. And there were downsides to it, and it's something that has to be refined. And I'm hoping, like, what we kind of see Revival trying to do might be this next stage of that, having a permanent, organized in-game housing where you have a place that matters and it localizes you, but it's also not scattered and unthematic and, really chaotic. So I'm looking at a mechanic like that to help keep people connected socially in little groups, but not, in ways like the neighborhood. For example, in Revival, you're connected to your neighborhood. That's a small group. You may have other ties to larger social structures, but you're connected with those people because they're your neighbors and you have to see them every day or what have you.
And with a live storytelling element and involved developers, if there's a group of people who are demonstrating in the game that they have common goals and have been setting up in the same place, that through working with the development team and with their approval, if it fits their vision for what's an acceptable progression of the world, some sort of a moderation, which I approve of. Some people would hate that, but especially in a game like Revival, having some moderation of it to make sure that only the kinds of things popped up that fit the theme of the world correctly mattered, but that you can see things, you can see real changes happen, not instantly, not random, but groups of people working together, coming together naturally, can eventually affect the game.
Yeah, tying back to...
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, it just comes down to having a game that's actually responsive enough and having things that actually matter, having change actually be a thing. It might not even be a city. Maybe it's a specific forest that you and your friends, bandits or otherwise, seem to use for your activities. Maybe your druids. Maybe that's where you get all of your herbs, or the poison frogs that you make your darts from, or lick to get a little high, or whatever. You know, whatever the reason is, it's not actually it's not actually a city. It's more of a region, and you're going to want to defend that region. If things are coming through and eating your poison frogs, eating your poison mushrooms, or whatever, you're going to want to deal with those. If somebody, deforestation in the area that your most valuable resources are, or just areas that you don't want people cutting down trees, you're going to do something about it. So, and that actually, I really like that too, because it also means you're going to have people on, opposing sides where, it's good relative to their side. You're trying to protect this area. They're trying to cut trees down. They have a contract from the city or nearby or whatever to cut these trees down. You're saying, hell no, this is my home. So now they're on the side of good for the city, that they're justified to defend themselves and try to get these trees down, and you're on the side of good for defending your side, trying to protect this forest. So that's somewhere that I think in terms of groups, if you have a common goal, a common thing that you're trying to do, once it's strong enough that there's enough people with that common goal, then you've essentially created your own, not necessarily a faction, but your own side when it comes to disputes. And I think that's something else that having a responsive, reactive world is really, really necessary for.
And if you have shared goals like that, the natural grouping happens. If there's a group of people who actually care about keeping that area the way it is, either for financial reasons, for religious reasons, for whatever that reason is, these groups of people come together, and it is natural, and it has meaning, and it's much better than LFG
or improving the area.
Yeah, whatever the reason is to get together, it's not, I need 3 mages for Magister's Terrace.
Now, we're talking a lot about, natural, we want things to be natural, organic, and how it just would flow, but, it all has to eventually be tied back into systems and design and architecture for the game. And one thing I was thinking of when Nura was talking was the fact that, having a responsive world, like what we've experienced, I think, with we've experienced developers looking at grouping in their game and saying, what do we want grouping to do for our game? And they come up with a list of things they want it to do, and they try and make their formal small group fit, do those things for their game. What they're not doing is looking at small grouping and saying, how is this going to affect the other systems of our game? Like, how is it going to interact? Because what I mean is basically, I'll use Revival as another example really quick. They talked about having potential spell casting where it would be group casting. You would need multiple people to accomplish a specific goal. That, for example, maybe, if you're thinking in the way that this will interact with your world, we can go back to the player housing or something. You have these these like cultic members that want to cast some rituals, so they, start meeting up. They buy a couple tenements in the middle of a crap town together, and, they meet up in one of the things, and in their neighborhood they just get together, and it's a dark neighborhood, and they start forming this connection through not just a group system of the game, which would be group spellcasting, but also it's facilitated by the way that group spellcasting might interact with player housing and the way that they've allowed players to obtain houses and use them. So that's one thing I don't think enough developers have done, because when you're going to design an MMO after they've already been made, you're just looking at a traditional model and you're looking at, okay, what problems will doing this cause to all the other systems, rather than, starting from scratch and saying, what do we want this to actually do in our game, and how can we make that happen with a combination of systems, not just tack this on and this affects this and this. It's just, I don't know, that's one thing that's kind of intrigues me about Revival's game design period, is just having a bunch of small separate systems that bounce around and interact with each other, rather than a huge system with a lot of parts. If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think part of it is also that grouping was designed after it was realized that they built a game that was all about, I need to get stronger so I can kill harder stuff. And that's the only part of the game. And I actually wish Phantom X were on, because in our Skype chat earlier in the week, he expects that is the meaning to play an RPG, is to get stronger, and if I understand him right, but we'll have a conversation another day. So the game has to be about something other than I get stronger so I can kill harder stuff, so that they don't have to put in a roadblock, say, well, that's just stupid. You can't kill Illidan yourself.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say is, should levels be more significant than numbers, or should numbers be more significant than levels? Should a level 60 be able to do more than 10 level 10s? Should there even be that much of a power scale?
I would say absolutely not.
We should get rid of levels, or have a shallow level like EverQuest Next was talking about. Shallow, not steep level. So we shouldn't have level 60.
Logarithmic growth curve. That logarithmic growth curve is my I'm set. That's what I want out of a leveling system. I want no cap, and I want logarithmic growth. So your relative increase of power each level is smaller and smaller and smaller.
The thing with Saga of Lucimia was that's what they were after too. Might be why Phantom is so interested in that game, but that's the thing that was kind of a sticking point for me. Is Renfail was talking as if that's what they want to do, is to make it impossible to solo by making the monsters so difficult that you have to group, and that's the focus of the game, forcing people to group, because you can't kill a monster unless you're in a group. And I'm hoping we move away from that.
It's always interesting.
Those are the games that I'm looking for, that we move away from that.
It's always interesting to me when I see a game put arbitrary reasons up for people to get together, rather than, just having things in the game that the player on their own is going to say, I need to find other people to help me with this. I think Drew posted or said in the chat talking about heroic opportunities in EQ2, but that made me think actually back to EverQuest 1 with, your heroic weapons, and, performing your quest for these was something that was a quest you got. It came to you. It didn't come to a group. It was a quest that you got, and for most classes, there was no way you were going to be able to do it by yourself. Just no way. You had to get help from friends, or, from strangers even, to help you accomplish it. And I think that was one thing that was done well. EverQuest is interesting because it has this arbitrary grouping that you would do. But at that time, it didn't really feel like that arbitrary, because you just realized that your abilities were inadequate to accomplish much in the game without cooperating with others. And that kind of started this whole idea of grouping, and then it just took off from there, and it became this norm to just have small group formal in the game.
They were supporting groups, though. It came from a good place inside. It was how do we support grouping?
Well, here's the other thing is, when I think of D&D, I think of scalable content. If you're doing the dungeon with one person, you send the one person number of creatures at them, and you give the one person number of loot. You've got 5 people, you send the 5 creatures at them. Or even more, if they want to kind of try to emphasize that grouping's important, unless you're really tough enough, they can send at you 2 creatures if you've only got one person going at it, but 3 creatures if you've got 2. You've got a little bit better chance of survival. By the time you've got a party of 5 people and you've got 6 creatures coming at you, you've got enough spike damage that you can just nuke each one down individually, and it's no problem anymore. So it's something where you shouldn't necessarily be punished for having lower numbers or even going at it solo if you're really tough enough, but that if you aren't tough enough solo, that the amount of increase from bringing more people, it's meaningful, but at the same time, that could be the first grouping that you come across in the instance or whatever. And this is still talking about more of a kind of a traditional instancy sort of model or whatever, because once again, I'm talking about it kind of in the context of like how a D&D campaign would be set up. So there could definitely be a lot of other rules and stuff. Maybe that same group has 15 creatures later, where a solo person will only have 2. Or an area that you could sneak by with 1 or 2 people. Now you're making enough ruckus that it raises an alarm and you have to fight all the things. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff, and making the content scalable. If it's going to be an instance, you can at least make it responsive, so it's a different experience based on how you approach it and the skill sets of who comes in.
I agree with you, and I disagree too. I think scalable content is great for preventing player frustration. You want to make sure that the content is a level that a player is going to play it and enjoy it. But I also think too that pinnacle achievements in a game, especially a multiplayer game, pinnacle achievements need to be. I think it's so undervalued that some of the most impressive things that happen in our world today are just well-managed relationships. Like, people don't really think about that anymore, but I think that it's true, and I think in an MMORPG where the basis is social interactions, just to some extent, it's a game you're playing with other people, the pinnacle achievements should be group achievements, and I don't think that, maybe that if you're going to have scalable to some level on those, then it would be 10 people versus 5 people. Maybe if you had 5 really strong people, they could do something that normally would take 10 people. But ultimately, I think not really forcing, but I don't know, just having set up that this is a pinnacle achievement in this game to, maybe you need to slay a dragon to get something, to craft an epic legendary weapon or something. It's not something any one person can do alone, and that shouldn't be an issue ever in a game.
But I want to see. What I want to see is encounters that, and these have to be dynamic. So scaling content to me would be, if I'm a rogue and I go into a dungeon solo, the content that I want to achieve is exploration, scouting, maybe creating a map, so then I can take it back and give it to a group that wants to go in and defeat the dungeon. As a scout, I'm not necessarily interested in defeating and killing everything in there. I want to go in, stealth my way through, get some intel, and bring it back to a group, so the group can then go in and take care of it however they're going to take care of it. Maybe I might want to steal a couple of pieces of treasure, but it's not this grand thing where the only thing that we do is go in and kill a bunch of stuff. And that's one way to change those scales. But speaking of D&D, how many of us played Sword Coast Legends?
I only played it for one little random dungeon campaign session. It's like, it definitely feels like something that you need to have a group and a DM for it to be meaningful, because otherwise it's just this awkward, not quite as smooth as an action RPG.
I actually wrote an article this week about breaking down I really think that Sword Coast Legends is intriguing because they're doing something risky with a big IP, basically. Instead of doing a tried and true model and just making profit off it, they're trying to create a subgenre between genres, between tabletop and between digital RPG. which is kind of, it's kind of really risky because, you could alienate one or both audiences depending on if it doesn't go the way you want. But I think what makes it really interesting is because you've got to, you really have to look at the single player content. I think the real like actual thing that's going to kill or make that game is actually the single player campaign, because if that is compelling enough, people will be playing through it, and then they'll be grouping up in smaller groups to do things on the side. Maybe if they're not strong enough for their particular character style that they made that has some wacky combination of abilities, they're not power gaming, and they have to be stronger to defeat the next chapter in their story or something, then they're going to go into group games and do things. And I think that's the only way that people are going to kind of fight through some of the... I think that it's a little bit rough. It is in Head Start, but it's hard.
A little bit
it's
rough.
hard
It's a lot. It's
yeah.
really, really, really rough.
It's a rough experience.
It's awkward to play, and the big problem with it, and the reason why the bridge is a pipe dream, is this: everyone who develops a video game, an RPG video game, needs to understand that every single thing that you automate is now less dynamic than if you had pencil and paper. So if you have pencil and paper, there's unlimited freedom. If you go to a text video game, there's some constriction. When you start adding graphics in, the constriction level becomes amazing. The reason that we don't have the kinds of flexibility in a pencil and paper game and a graphical game is that the technology doesn't even exist to come close, and if it did, there's no real good UI solution for it. So you either get to the point where you have the technology, but it takes years to teach people how to use that, and they don't want to. It's the landmark building problem. That you finally have tools that you can build pretty cool voxel structures in a game, but the learning curve to get into it is pretty tough. It's not like I glue a couple tongue depressors together and I've got a makeshift house and paint it and put fake thatch on. It's not like doing it with your hands. Maybe once we get into AR and things like that and have hand tools for building and constructing things in front of us, that'll work. But with Sword Coast, I played a couple live DM things, and the DMs are like, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? The quality of player-made quests are, I don't know.
You know what it's like. You know what it's like to write a story. You know what it's like to write a story.
Yeah,
and what really writing a story is, and conveying that in a constricted environment, is very, very difficult. There are a handful of people with the capability of doing a good job.
Yeah,
and they're paid to do it.
That was my biggest critique that I really put in that game, is that the underlying kind of unknown thing that people don't realize is you're trying to get... The only way that people are going to get everything that game has to offer is if there are really good DMs that understand the system and are going to use it. However, the people that have that ability set and skill set to DM games in like a tabletop group scenario would probably prefer doing it in the freedom of a tabletop experience, not in that. So you're not going to get those people, and now you're going to require your typical average, digital RPG player to step up and try and assume that role, and it's not going to be easy to do. Some people will do it. Some people will be able to do it, but it's not going to be many. And I think the game is just going to kind of suffer because of it's going to cause that. Just because the nature of being, like you said, Sog, just being this bridge between the two genres is extremely difficult. Which is why, the only thing that's going to allow that game to survive is if it has a great single player that's going to keep people playing rough multiplayer modules or dealing with shoddy GM or DMing.
And
I mean, we
it's
are really.
possible. It just needs to be treated as a separate genre, and and the problems need to be addressed for what they are, instead of trying to be something that it can just never be.
It's really early still, I think. Or maybe it's too early, so everybody's still trying to figure out how to play the game. And so there is going to be that learning curve towards becoming a good dungeon master. But what I found fascinating about playing so far, Zog and I actually did play in a group. It wasn't particularly fun in terms of the grouping aspect.
It didn't make any difference. They didn't talk. One guy talked to us for a little bit.
A little bit, but even we weren't really role play. I mean, it just
because the combat mechanics are bad. They're just bad. They're bad, and I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt on this. The combat mechanics in that game are bad, and it doesn't feel like you're working together and making plans and stuff. It doesn't feel like the kind of situation that it was designed, that it was intended.
You know what it feels like? It feels like you're supposed to pause at every possible opportunity to check in with everybody and check on the situation. Because when you declare to move, for example, you cannot stop moving until your character's made it from point A to point B. You cannot cancel that movement because it's a declared turn-based movement. I am going from point A to point B. So that's one of those faults of it being on a turn-based system. It's not very flexible, and if you're looking to have more of an action-oriented campaign, it's not possible. It's locked into this turn-based system, and it's really stiff and awkward.
It's also the same problem we talked about with like MMORPGs, where it ends up just being about getting stronger so you can kill stronger monsters, and there's not anything in there. Because it's so difficult to add a feeling of context into a player module, all you're doing is going from one room to the next to kill something. So all you're doing in the game is going to the next room to kill something, but the act of killing something is not enjoyable.
Right. Well, here's one of the other things. When thinking about Sword Coast Legends, it really sounds like the best experience you're going to have is playing with a group of people that you already know and have played with, and that kind of takes the wind out of the sails of it being an online multiplayer game in many ways, because that means there's 1,000 other people playing the game, but you're only going to play with 4 others. So not just because that's the size of the game, but also because that's just you're not going to play with anyone else. And then if you're not all on at the same time, you're not going to play. So it kind of defeats the purpose.
Well, yeah, I don't think of it as a massively multiplayer game. I mean, I guess there's a lobby aspect of that. It's definitely closer to co-op.
It's a co-op.
Yeah,
it's a co-op game.
But one of the things that fascinated me about that is that I was thinking that I would want to play with our group. But I actually had more fun playing solo.
Because you can pause it and do all the things that Nero said.
Yeah, and specifically playing solo with the companions, where I could have them running around and pause and direct them, and it felt more turn-based like tabletop D&D. And hopefully maybe one of the good things about having the story actually come online, when it does come online, maybe that will help direct the GMs in terms of developing dungeons that give us a better context and better story that's connected to the overall plot. But it was just really surprising to me that I think all of us started with the idea that, as a group, we would like to go in and as a group play together, but once we actually tried it, it was like, I mean, we all kind of split up and did our own thing anyway.
Well, the depressing part of it is that, the game at its best being played as a single player, essentially, where you're pausing. There's other games that do it better. I mean, Divinity Original Sin, Dragon Age,
better, yeah.
those are just two examples of games that do. I mean, Knights of the Old Republic. Sorry, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. Great games where you've got, a pause-based, turn-based type system where you've got allies and stuff. It's cool to think that those would be awesome in co-op, and they probably would if you were like at a console and you had your best friend sitting there with the other controller and you were, both micromanaging the decisions together between pauses. But other than that, that type of experience has a very narrow appeal for multiplayer game. It just, I mean, I don't know.
I think that the decisions could be made in real time, just like a group in World of Warcraft or Rift or any other main MMORPG style, and it would be just that kind of game where I was mentioning earlier. Fugazi had said, I guess Destiny is similar, that just a lobby based, people make their own dungeons. They can add story to it if they want, but you get 4 or 5 people and you go run dungeons together. If there were a WoW dungeon maker, kind of like Mario Maker, people would play it all the time, and people would be designing better dungeons than you could make, like, in a week. If the tools were out there, that's what Sword Coast could do very well. But the benefit that Sword Coast offers, and I've been very negative about this game, but if you had the time and you could create a huge variety of different open locations on your map where people had freedom to travel, and there was a way there was a sense of exploration and learning about the world and getting to know NPCs and seeing how they linked up in complex quest lines, that would be great. But instead, the game is designed where you accept a quest and you check things off, and it's very linear and not. It's weird.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It kind of like reminds me of, I always would joke with friends that, a good DM is going to create a great story and the players are going to have fun playing through a story. A great DM is one that can create story elements on the fly, allowing the players to kind of have a free will in the world as a group. And that it makes a totally different type of experience than something where you're kind of being walled in to a specific goal or something. But a great DM will either be able to hide that or just divert you back on course on the fly. So I don't know.
One of the cool things about Sword Coast, I liked the little quirky skills or abilities that the companions had. Like the dwarf rogue has a thing where he becomes drunk. An ability that lets him fight while drunk, and I think it buffs his constitution or something like that. There was a point where I could, I dabbled a little bit with creating a dungeon, and as I was designing an NPC, one of the weapons that was available was a rolling pin, and I was like, why can't I find that in the game that I can use to develop my character and make a quirky character out of? So there are some elements that are in there, but I don't know if you can get those as a player. That might be cool. But again, I hopefully some of that will open up once they add story elements to it, and we'll be able to participate there. What about so Saga of Lucimio is interesting. Oh, not Sword Coast. I'm thinking of Crowfall. Are the three of you all anticipating playing that game?
I will check it out. I'm afraid that despite having some great ideas, it's going to feel one-dimensional. But in talking about groups, there's a very interesting concept in Crowfall where, depending on which campaigns you're going into, different memberships and organizations and different types of allegiances are of prime importance. So you could go in based on your alignment of, like, was it like order and chaos kind of? I forget what.
Order, balance, chaos.
Order,
Yeah.
balance, chaos. You could go in for your specific god that your character has chosen to follow, or you could go in for your guild, and or you could go into the ultimate free-for-all, every man for himself, and just see how groups form, which will end up being guild versus guild, because that's what happens, I think. That's my guess. But I like the idea of, you might meet people that share a common goal if you don't play only the guild versus guild stuff. I'm more interested in the alignment versus alignment and the deity versus deity, and going in and being part of a group with a shared motive. But it's planet side, but fantasy. It's not, there's no real thing going on. There's no evolving world. There's a progressing. It's progressing through seasons and changing, but
it gets more difficult. But
yeah,
it all gets wiped away at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, their whatever their outer worlds is, the permanent one. That's the intriguing thing to me. That's really the only thing about the game that
the Eternal Kingdom.
Yeah, the Eternal Kingdom, that has me wondering what type of role-playing game potential, like an actual potential of doing something with your character, other than just using your character to facilitate competitive play.
I imagine that like early Landmark, where people build things on their claims and they're like advertising it, begging people to come, and nobody does. Like, I imagine it just like Landmark. I'm thinking, wow, we could do all this cool role playing on this claim, but you know what? Nobody ever comes.
Well, it's like World of Warcraft. How many people have actually got people to come visit their garrisons besides like your one or two closest friends? They're like, oh yeah, I'll come check out what buildings you put in, but you know, it's their own little personal space that they've customized, and in effect is still just useless space that is only for them. It's not a multiplayer play space.
In Crowfall, EK Wars is slated for like an expansion or something like that. Like it's on the table for way in the future after they release the game, and I think they have an idea for making them meaningful, but it doesn't fit the scope of the current project. And at that point, I could see it being really cool.
I think it's going to be a little bit of a different thing, the Eternal Kingdom. I think there's going to be adventuring and things to do there that's, you know, kind of different and has different implications than if you're going into the PvP realms. So there might be some amount of like actually grouping in PvE that exists in those areas, depending on what you've built up and how far the tiles are from your start point or something like that.
It would be cool if in the Eternal Kingdoms your character had permadeath, but in all the other places they did. That would be cool. Because then
so
it would
no longer your home was taken over, and because you died and you have no home, now you just have a text lobby instead of your own Eternal Kingdom.
You just have to have an air system or something, make depth relevant. I just think that the game just needs something else to not be a Camelot. It's basically like another flavor of Camelot Unchained. It's just an endless competitive
Camelot
experience.
Unchained is an ongoing world where
I just think that
is more like PlanetSide 2 than Camelot Unchained.
But either way, it all boils down to you're not really doing anything meaningful with your character other than your character is facilitating your ability to fight other players. Whereas, like, that's, I think, where you, like, kind of find the difference between some MMORPGs where your goal isn't necessarily, your character isn't facilitating you just fighting other people or just fighting NPCs. You're actually trying to do something with your character, which I think is the appeal to me. I like being able to develop a character story or explore the lore in a world or what have you, whatever limited amount of story progression they offer, I find interesting, and the way that I can develop my character through that. But and which is why I want to see more games move towards that, because I think once you start going that direction, then all the things that, seem arbitrary and lame about grouping today are fun again, because once you're pursuing an agenda, then seeing who's also pursuing that agenda is intriguing. It's not just, oh, hey, you're a useful tool for me as another player. They're not just resources for you. They're actually other people that have an agenda, and you have to pay attention to their wants and needs and what they're doing, because it can change at any moment. So
something you're saying there kind of actually reminded me of something I wanted to bring up earlier, is the idea of a bunch of groups being given this one quest or whatever, but it ends up being, whoever completes it first is the one who actually gets to cash it in. And once that happens, everyone else will get something in their mailbox saying, thank you very much for taking the contract. However, it's already been completed, and see you later. So that's definitely something I could see. Whether it's killing a creature somewhere or fulfilling a work order or whatever it is. That's something, and then that once again comes down to groups in a lot of different ways, because a lot of these things are going to be tasks that are bigger than one person. So everybody who is participating gets a piece of the action. So if everybody individually accepts this contract or whatever, and then find each other in the tavern or whatever by one means or another, then you have a group of a few people who have this common goal, and they're going to have an advantage over the person that accepts the quest or whatever, and just grabs a map and heads straight for it.
Are you talking about how contested content affects grouping dynamics? Is that where you're...
Grouping affects grouping dynamics, as well as being something where, like, forming a group and going out to do something actually matters. Like, you have to go and do it. Otherwise, that thing to do in the world won't be there 2 weeks from now.
That's a double-bladed sword, though, because if you don't have some type of system that's going to allow for players that didn't complete it to still feel like valuable, then that's going to discourage people from trying to do content together, because they're going to be like, oh, if I'm not first, this is all a waste of time. So it's tough. That's tough to have that. Contested content is always a tricky thing, I think. Because you're either going to upset people, but at the same time you're actually making elements of the game extremely meaningful by having them be, rare or selective in that sense. So
as long as you don't make it too much of a rich get richer thing, where like the person that wins the first race is now all of a sudden better equipped to win upcoming races, and people feel like they have a chance, and the actual actions that they're performing are enjoyable, and given that little competition rush, I think that it can be very rewarding. But you have to find a way to balance it, and it can't be as simple as everybody is standing in one place waiting to see who can hit the key the fastest when something spawns, or there has to be more to it.
Right.
Well, some of what that reminds me of is the druid versus the shadow. Not the druids. It's the shadow versus the dryads in EverQuest Next, where the dark elves are trying to extract the nature magic from the dryads so that they can use that to convert it into shadow magic, which will power their shadow spells and their shadow weapons and armor. And as a rogue, when I would think about that, I normally am not into PvP, but that would push me into PvP if I can. If I gotta kill some dryads so that my shadow magic is stronger and that makes me better at stealth, I'm willing to kill some dryads, or at least siphon off their magic. And that's a kind of organic way of pushing player versus player combat. But also the ending result of that is kind of what Neuro is talking about, I think, where you have this push and pull, where either the Dryads win or the Dark Elves win, and there can be differing outcomes from that. And maybe even if I lose in Kithakor, maybe that will drive me to go exploring someplace else where I can take over and win.
And I
Just because
think,
you lose in... Go ahead.
no, I was going to say, I think, just to jump in real quick, Neuro had said earlier, finding a way to reward players for participating in a situation like that, where even dying in the battle is, extremely glorious or rewarding for a player. Like, yeah, okay, I'll participate, because I know even if I die, I'm gaining ground in some avenue that they want to gain ground in.
I think
Well,
that
yeah,
Well, I
if
mean,
you're
it's just
participating on the losing side, that the benefit is that you were part of a social group that put up the fight and built together, and your reward is that you're closer, and now you're known as one of the people who's gonna stick up for this, and your social ties grow. And then if you're on the winning side, that it shouldn't be that there's just one reward dished out and only one person get it, but it should be that the change that happened in the world is beneficial for all of the people that were working on that side. And the people that didn't win need to be okay with it not being... that losing it has to be acceptable. That you have to walk away from losing not thinking that your game career is over and like your life is over. You go back and you regroup and you talk to these people and you figure out what you're going to do differently, or if you just need to move on and start working in a different direction.
But for me, some of that would work out okay in the Dark Elf versus Dryad situation, where maybe I've gained some armor, some shadow armor or something, because we've won some battles and I've gotten reward from some of the battles, but we've lost the war, so I don't get the major rewards. But that doesn't happen, I think, in Crowfall. I think in Crowfall, the people who lose don't get to bring the stuff that they got back to the...
you might get to bring a portion of it back. But the example specifically with the Storybricks demo was the idea that if there's 3 of you and there's 20 of them, you guys are going to get taken out. There's just nothing you can do. But the fact that instead of running away like the other 2 did, you actually stood your ground. Not only do you get respect for your faction, but you get respect from the enemies because they see at least you had the guts to stick around and die honorably. So even though you were on the opposing side, dying to them, you still were able to not come out with a negative tick on your reputation, but actually a positive tick that they recognize you.
You've kind of touched on...
If it's about what the NPCs think of you, that's fine. And I don't have a problem with earning NPC reputation, but my goals involve... I want NPCs to be second-class citizens. I want players to be first-class citizens and NPCs to be second-class. So earning reputation within a player-run organization and being known as part of a group working together, where the NPCs are basically our property. That I would rather have, not in a slavery sense, but they're working for us. Instead of us working for NPCs. That's the shift that I would prefer, but I can, in the situation you're talking about where fighting affects your reputation and fighting and dying is a positive, not a negative. I agree 100%.
Well, makes it...
That's actually something I was thinking about earlier, is the idea of importance being this kind of hidden stat that applies to all things in the world, player and NPC. And there's things depending on your level of importance and the thing that you're dealing with. Different things will occur. That person that walks in the room and catches everybody's attention, and maybe a little cutscene plays. That person's got like 25 to 50 importance. They're a big deal. If it's anything bigger than that, you already knew they were on their way to town because there was a giant parade on the way there. Versus, a peasant, they've got an importance of 1. So players would maybe start with an importance of maybe 5, just so they're not completely bottom of the barrel, and have some influence, but they're not going to have as much influence as, say, captain of the guard at like 10. People know who they are, respect their, that person's orders, and that person has, counsel with the authorities. So how that also kind of plays into role playing is, yes, NPCs not just there as kind of our servants, but also kind of as our almost as our entertainment. You have a high importance target that some thugs have managed to ambush their carriage. They're not going to kill that person because they're recognized for their importance. So then the quest gets put out one way or another, or the word gets spread that this person's been captured, and then it kind of becomes this artificial, like, whoever forms a group and is able to complete this task first ends up being the winners or whatever. So that's kind of a way I think NPCs could really be made more worthwhile relative to players, is that players will ultimately end up building a lot more importance, be a lot more meaningful, but then there will still be like really, really high influence, really high importance characters, like a dragon, for example. That's going to be somewhere up in the 80s. Like it's something of legend, but yet it exists in the world and will totally eat you and destroy your village if you provoke it. So, likewise, taking down something like that, everybody involved, big and small, even if you were just the supplier that made the potions that everybody drank, you're still going to get a little piece of that action, player or NPC.
I think I've always been a fan of the idea of, if you're going to have an artificial world, obviously there's not going to be enough people in that world for it to feel good, so the NPCs are an important part. I always think blending the NPCs as seamlessly into the character population as you can. Obviously, I don't think the technology exists to give every NPC the autonomy to try and progress the same way a player can. However, I do think the technology exists for NPC organizations to pursue the same goals that player organizations can. And that can be, they can get artificially boosted by, them being an organization and saying, hey, this NPC went out and did this, even though they may not have actually done that. There's definitely some illusion to you can create an illusion to create the effect. But I was thinking, while we're sitting here like armchairing a perfect experience, if you take that, imagine if you take that Dryad Shadow Knight scenario you're talking about, where you're 3 people and 20 people run up on you, but you have a live storyteller there that sees the imbalance and says, hey, what if the power of this god comes down and empowers these 3 people, and all of a sudden it's an even fight, or close to an even fight.
Well, even
now,
better, they let the losing team lose, but then those people are recognized by that god and given a special, different kind of opportunity going forward. Because if the game is cheating in that way, like if they are, if a group of players has created a beneficial situation and they find that the people running the game are taking that away from them, that's a negative experience. But there should be a way that occasionally not walking away and continuing to stand for what your character believes in and fighting even on that losing side and giving it a shot, then the god is noticing that, and later on, and now you have opportunities because you've really proven that you're a devout follower that may not have existed, and it was because not because you lost, but because you tried. And to really put forward that idea that losing isn't the end. Losing isn't a terrible, terrible thing, as long as what you're doing is what your character should be doing, and there are ways that you can be rewarded down the line for that. Like, you can be the greatest fighter on the losing side, but you're still the greatest fighter.
Stefan said in the Storybricks demo that being on the losing side could open up opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise. That it's not the end to rewards. There's just different types of rewards that become possible. So yeah.
And I do like. I know it's very hard to implement in some of these games where you have thousands of people logged into one server at one time, and trying to do it right where you have live storytelling and gods granting boons and stuff without there being all kinds of favoritism that's terrible. It's very difficult to manage from a game operator standpoint, but that's why we have people like Ombla running the show there.
Well, the other thing too is, I don't know if any of you guys saw the recent Crowfall blog update or whatever, where they talked about, their alpha, and they basically took numbers they got and they said, hey, this many people played this class, or this archetype and this much, and this is how they use their abilities. All these types of like built-in tracking that a lot of games have now that they didn't have before. That kind of stuff can be used to help, a game controller, a game moderator, a storyteller, or a storytelling team keep track of who's doing certain things and actually do things retroactively, instead of just being there in the moment too. So these are all like newer things that are becoming staples, I would say, in modern gaming and game development that can help actually improve the in-game live experience, beyond just like helping finish the product. So that's something I'd keep an eye on too, because I from what I've heard Snipe Hunter talk about Revival, it sounds like, but not just their tagging system, but they have a lot of tracking systems that they're planning to implement for that to help, help that team facilitate its goal of managing a lot of players in a positive way.
Yeah.
We have
I'm excited for that. There's one thing I just wanted to say real quick before we get into that question, is that death consequences actually is one other thing that could be a lot better. And whether you're solo or with a group, there could be different things. If you die as a group, the idea that you have to run back together, potentially even fight through things together, versus if you you die solo and you die in some real dishonorable way. Instead, you have this like dark labyrinth that you have to try to get through to get from point A to point B. Or if you're stuck in there for 5 minutes or more, something comes and fetches you and drops you somewhere or whatever, and you just have to deal with it. Different sorts of things. And that kind of ties into what we were talking about before, the idea that if you're doing something, you're doing the right thing, and you die honorably, that the consequences for death are a lot less painful than if you're going and doing something stupid or something that's overtly greedy and going above and beyond what you should be doing.
Totally piggybacking on the back of that concept you were just talking about, where dying and having to deal with something after death. The topic of our show being about groups, now instead of being the situation you run into in a group in modern MMOs, oh crap, if you can live, try and live. Now, hey, stand till the last man, and because you're going to be better off all dying together and being all together and, trying to get out of that, together. So it helps with the grouping experience, I think, could potentially.
But I like wipe with honor, not just everyone die right now.
So just suicide.
Yeah. Okay, I made one mistake. Wipe the raid so we can start over. But I've been in situations that if you keep healing, they get mad.
Yeah, I know exactly. I've been there before. Because you killed the first two bosses. You can't screw up, otherwise the mobs from those first two bosses will spawn again.
Why are you still healing? Wipe now.
Yeah.
That's the way I felt in Sword Coast Legends, actually. I would go into a dungeon and people would pop in, and in the beginning I was just routing all of the enemies into one room and then die, and then while they're all stuck in that room, I'd go off and run somewhere else in the dungeon to clear my stuff. But then people would drop into the dungeon and they'd start killing stuff, and I'd be like, no, I'm dead. I need you to die so I can come back, and I gotta wait for you to kill everything.
I was one of those guys. I logged into a campaign, and someone had built it, and it was a circular path in a forest. And I logged in and everyone around me died, but I'm the cleric and I've got awesome healing abilities even at like level 6. So I'm kiting all of the mobs in the entire thing around this circle of trees and going. Eventually, I think they were upset that I wouldn't just die and start over, but then they started cheering for me as like I killed one or two of them. Like I was like, they were treating me like I was some sort of hero, that it was even possible I could succeed, but I didn't. I was the hero that could have been. So should we do this question? Should we ask Kazim's question? Yep. Should an MMORPG have any solo content at all, or should everything be group-based? Everything group-based is a terrible idea for an MMORPG and a wonderful idea for any kind of lobby-based co-op game.
Yeah, I agree. All of my favorite character archetypes would be null and void if I had to group all the time, because I love being off on my own. I love being part of a social dynamic and bigger social structures and operating and achieving agendas, but I don't like to be sharing my loot with people and all that other stuff.
Sometimes I just don't like having to deal with grouping mechanics, and if I can just go out in the world and blast things and have fun with it, yeah, that's what I do. I've been doing that a lot in Defiance. It's just, okay, I want to shoot this, I'll shoot this. I want to do this quest and shoot things, I'll do that. It's whatever. You know, if it's... Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and we should all be honest here too. You don't always play game coming into it with like, hey, I'm gonna pick up where I left off. Some days you just had a bad day and you just want to vent and enjoy your time, and you don't want to be worrying about all the group stuff. You just want to go kill some stuff or achieve something and relax.
And I should have a choice of taking my time killing things that I'm comfortable taking. If what I'm doing is going out killing things, if that. I should have a choice where I could just comfortably do things at my own pace that I do on my own, and have that be rewarding in a reasonable way, instead of feeling like if I am not doing 5-man content, that is something separate. Like if there's somewhere I want to go that I'm not comfortable that I could survive getting there on my own, and I need to call somebody for help, that's good. The problem in a lot of games is, like in EverQuest, it became, when people realized that you could zerg through, then all of a sudden you got 60 people in a zone, and the stuff's dying that wasn't intended to be played that way, and that's why it got segmented off into solo content and group content. But the idea of picking up help when you need help, I think it just needs to be rethought so that it's possible, and not... I would be really annoyed if I logged into a server and there were 80 people going through 10-man content, or stuff that, potentially I would need 9 helpers for, but they're just literally rolling over an area and everything's dying. But those are the people that quit after a month anyway, so I guess it's not a big deal.
I think there should be ample opportunity for people to be social, but not everything has to be a group. And so for me, the massively multiplayer aspect is the ability to socialize with other people. And like I said earlier, I loved going around and being able to buff people. I loved being able to jump in at the end of it. If I saw somebody dying from a mob, I loved being able to jump in and help kill that mob, even without necessarily being in a formal group with them. So I like being social. I like having other players that I can interact with, but I don't want to be forced to be in a formal group.
We got another question from Sailkite in the meantime. Stemming off of the death discussion, do you have opinions on how to manage the downtime players have while waiting for the rest of the group to wipe? Should players be allowed to contribute to the success of those still living in an encounter, even though they've died? So kind of like the medium, like you could have all of a sudden you have dead people that are able to move in a different plane, and you have a medium in the group that's able to communicate with the dead to get more options. Like in Town of Salem, there's the medium role. That was pretty cool.
Well, I know exactly what I want to see for this, and this is a variety of kind of after death spirit based skills or whatever. You'd have to train them while you're dead, practice. There's ways you could learn about them while you're alive, but a lot of them might be actually exploring the death realm, and trying not to get caught by something that's going to force you back to life or force you into a part of the death realm that you're not going to want to be in. But the idea that you can learn your poltergeist skill if you're more of a physical based character, the ability to affect the world in different ways, whether it's throwing an object or even being able to pick the resurrection potion out of somebody's bag and pour it in their throat to revive them while you're dead. Stuff like that. Tripping a creature, trying to like grab onto part of it, or even another one, either a medium or someone else who maybe have the skill to do this, that they are able to infuse your soul into their equipment temporarily. So you're a better swordsman than they are. They're using a sword. That you automatically give them your sword skill plus some little extra bonus for the duration until you revive. That's the sort of stuff I'd really love to see.
Actually, possessing one of the enemies coming at you. There are lots of cool things that you could do, and lots of different ways that you could make a progression system with that. But I don't want to see, like in Project Gorgon, I'm just going to die a lot because I want to see what happens when my death level goes up. If you guys didn't know, you level up in dying in Project Gorgon.
Yeah, you do.
But it's actually neat. After a while, instead of it changes what happens when you die at different levels. But I don't like any system that urges a character to do something that should be unwanted or not undesirable repeatedly in order to get a benefit out of it.
For this specific example, I have a specific way to deal with it, and it's basically you have more death sickness. The longer that you're dead, so to actually do things in the land of the living, it sucks if you've been dead a lot or if you keep on intentionally dying, because it's gonna keep on impacting with each death. It's gonna get longer and longer. You're gonna have to go through some special means to actually get it all reversed and finally, restore yourself to 100%. So something like that, I could see. Like, yeah, it sucks to die. You don't want to do it. If you do, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the session. But it definitely does have a bit of a sting, especially if you let it happen too much.
Yeah, I see what Sog's saying. Like, as somebody who's a big fan of story and immersion and context in the game that I'm playing, anytime a game's encouraging, even if unintentionally, anytime a game's mechanics encourage that players play out of the context of what their character should be doing, it bothers me to some extent. It's not the end of the world, but good games would be designed to where players will make decisions based on what makes sense for the character they've chosen and the path they're pursuing. But
building systems where someone makes 800 campfires in a line down the entire length of the world RuneScape is it's not a good way of doing it. It's a failure of a lot of practice and skill-based systems, and I don't know the ultimate solution to that, but people talk about wanting systems where the more you do something, the better you get at it. But every time I've seen that implemented, like Dig says, the first thing he does if he were to play EverQuest is just swim all day so that he never had to drown.
Well, I think part of it.
I don't want games that make it so that you think that you need to swim all day.
I think part of it's that you need to have a cap on what you can do if it's the simplest version of something, and then have to find more difficult versions. swimming in still water versus swimming in currents. That should be a different level of skill. You know, level 50 swimming or whatever, you can swim through whatever, but you need to be 150 or whatever to be able to swim against strong currents and not be completely swept away. You know, likewise, I could see that. I could see that really working with a lot of different skills. If you're trying to start a campfire, for example, you only need 30 to start it when it's dry. Maybe when it's a little bit moist, you got to be closer to 40. If it is like absolutely storming and you need to like do the most precautions as possible and do the full you know, bow drill technique or whatever to start this campfire, that's like 80 skill, and it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort to be able to do it consistently. 80 skill means that you can do it every single time, so building up to it, you're going to be sitting there for like 20 minutes trying to start that campfire. So there's ways you can practice. You soak all of your components in water ahead of time, and that way you can kind of increase your challenge level artificially so you can actually train and practice. Or you got a water wizard or whatever that's creating a current so you can swim against it and you know, be able to develop your swimming skills in that way.
I'm a fan of short steps with that. Like, if you just had 4 steps, like apprentice, journeyman, professional, and master, or whatever, and they each involved needing to accomplish something in the game world, whether it's reputation based or meeting someone and some studying, and a small amount of practice to max out what you've earned elsewhere. So not 8 hours of a day of swimming and then looking for the next hardest swimming area, because now you're in this mode where, that's just one example, like now all of my life is based around I just need to be a swimmer. No, like as you're going through the world, the opportunity is presented to you to learn more about swimming. So then you get this thing, well, yeah, I do need about an hour of swimming practice to max out that set. And the study portion and the some sort of story-driven way or contextual method of earning the ability to study it. Who are you learning that from? You're not. The skill-based systems are really the like throw them in the deep end and they'll figure out how to swim. Like everybody can try to make something, but you end up just learning it yourself.
Oh, he just reminded me of that John Wayne video where he throws the kid in the water.
I'm a big fan too of stepped skill systems, but even more so stepped skill systems that have some type of random variance to them or semi-random. And I'm just gonna use the opportunity, like always, to talk for a second about Revival. I like the idea that they're doing a study skill kind of flip-flop, and the fact that who you're studying from changes how far you can get in that instance before you have to. I like that. It just makes it to where you're not necessarily focused. Maybe you're focused on being the best swordsman or whatever, so this is your goal you pursue, and it's an unexpected adventure. You know, it's the Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit experience. It's an unexpected adventure and it's fun. Or maybe you're not, focused on doing any one skill and you're just exploring the world, and all of these things are unpredictable. You're not paying attention to a predictable number set that's changing. I like that. I just think that it takes people's eyes off of the game mechanics and allows them to experience the narrative of the story or the experience they're having with other players. They're not paying attention to the arbitrary elements of the game.
I think going back to Sailkite's question, and I'm gonna be using Revival, of course, too, as a reference. I think that it should not be a general case that players get to affect the world from the Death Realm once they die. I think people who become experienced with that and are building experience, building their spirit, learning the skills that are associated with being dead or being a ghost, those people should start to begin to be able to affect the material world while they're dead. A medium or necromancer might be able to facilitate that if one is around in the group. But that's based on building your character to excel at being dead. I plan to have one of my alts pursuing that, but I also have one of my alts in Revival who's going to be trying their best to become mad as quickly as possible so that they can explore what that means.
I'm gonna eat some mushrooms. I'm gonna lick some lead paint. I'm going crazy.
Sure.
Diggs is pointing out Revival. I think, the key thing, touching back on Sale's question originally, is you can do a lot of cool things with death and making people be still meaningful in the in the present situation to their companions while in death. But it depends on the game. Revival's a type of game that offers an environment where something like that could be possible, but not every game. I mean, you couldn't take any game out there and say, "Oh, let's throw these cool systems in." They just wouldn't make sense for a lot of games. So you really have it's totally dependent on the type of game, the lore, how they're able to have it make sense. Other words, it just feels weird and gamey and all those things that I don't like. So.
Yeah. So we're coming up upon 7:15. Do we want to wrap now? I'm trying to think if I had. I guess my last question for everyone was kind of: are there games other than Revival that you're looking forward to for the group experience specifically?
Crowfall. I want to try to get the Raging Primates coming over. Like, we've been ho hum with PlanetSide 2. It's like it's kind of fun, but at the same time, it just has not progressed that much since it launched in 2012. So we're looking for something where we can smash faces and fling poo in an environment that's satisfying to everybody. And some of our regulars have moved on to other games. Actually, a lot of people are playing Arcade, so we're hoping to kind of reunite those masses back in, and any gains that we got from that. And it's just something I'm really excited to just like get a group of like 10 people together and just smash faces, smash buildings, smash buildings with faces on them. It's something that I'm really excited for.
The one I would mention is actually like a current game. SOG actually got me into Achaea, so I'm looking forward to seeing the social elements of that game, which early on there's not a whole lot of that. So, but I'm interested to check it out. So that's the one on my list, other than Revival, and other than the tabletop system I'm developing. I'm having a lot of fun with. I've been since I'm mounting up to prepping for writing in November on my novel. I'm like kind of seeing all my other stuff that I'd done from the game too. So I'm toying with some really interesting stuff for group mechanics in tabletop games. So, and I've never seen them anywhere else. So it's kind of cool stuff. Destiny.
I have no other game that only Revival is interesting to me as an upcoming game at this point, because I tried so many games recently. Like, I got Guild Wars 2 for free, Wildstar went free, I played Arcade for a little while. I'm not even going to touch Blade and Soul. Like, I've tried. I thought I was
I like the combat in it.
I thought I was really going to like Wildstar. I thought I was. I played for 2 evenings and had I'm not logging back in, and I don't think it had anything. I wasn't even interested in grouping with people in that game. It didn't make sense, and people phased in and out of my area so rapidly, and it just I don't know. I'm gonna wait a little while before getting my hopes up on any new games. I think Revival has potential, but I'm going to wait until there's a little bit more going on there to jump in. I don't have the... I think I know myself too well to jump in on the, I have a house so I can log into my house and do nothing stage and then still be excited when there's really a game. So I'm going to wait. What about you, Diggs? Is there any other thing that you've seen on the.
No, I need to remember to watch Renfail play P1999. I want to watch his group play every day for 3 months or however many months
Yeah,
they're
it's
planning
in
to
the
do that.
morning though, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming they're going to put that up on YouTube so that we can watch it later.
It's like
But
7 in the morning your time.
yeah. I think it's funny because it's still only going to be his one group who will enjoy doing that, and that one group that will enjoy playing Saga of Lucimia. But I want to see what that's like. But in terms of playing, I can't see anything really other than EverQuest Next if that gets to a point where it looks like they're able to do what they said they were planning to do. But again, one of the big factors of that, one of the drawing points, was that we would be building Kinos. And if we're not building Kinos, I don't know how that affects my relationships with the NPCs there, with the other players in the game. We'll just have to see what comes out of that. So
It's interesting that you mentioned Project 1999 because I did some of that recently, like earlier in the year, and there's something to be said about if you've never played an early age MMO and experienced what the grouping was like in there. Like Project 1999 captures a lot, almost everything that EverQuest did, other than the fact that the population's a lot smaller. But it's funny, just the stupid things in that game that happen with like weird mob aggro and everything, like makes you have to face situations as a group where you have to do unique things or make tough decisions. It's just kind of an interesting game. So if people are really into that, it's free. So I mean, I guess as long as you have the EQ Titanium edition. But yeah, it's definitely a intriguing little experience. If you don't mind, also too, like really crappy texture resolution on everything.
and very slow combat.
Yes. Well, I don't know. It gets pretty fast-paced. With things happen fast. It kind of caught me off guard.
While you're in combat, and then you wait 6 minutes for another battle.
That's exactly it.
All right, I think we're wrapping up now. Before we start doing like a whole show on a whole different topic that we could do another show on another time. Thanks everybody for coming. Diggs, you want to close us out?
You're doing a great job.
All right.
Finish this up.
We'll see you guys next week. We got a guest from Project Spark coming on. We talked a little bit about some user-generated content today and how it affects things like grouping. But next week we'll be talking a lot about UGC and getting players to play instead of just creators to create. So that should be pretty fun. Neuro, you had something you wanted to...
Oh, no, I was just going to say I won't be joining the discussion. I'll be at Indiecade.
Neuro won't be there.
I will. I'll be back again, and I'm officially back, so I should be here most weeks from here on out. So it's fun. It's been fun just this one night, so I'm excited to be back.
Glad to have you back.